Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about ketogenic diets, vegan diets, and eating disorders. And this could be applied to any diet, depending upon the mindset that people take that excludes entire food groups. Let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on scaling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And a lot of people who follow these sort of diets, they tend to be big in the fitness world, so I'm going to get a lot of blowback on this video. A lot of people who follow these diets are going to jump in and freak out. And that's how you know you're dealing with someone who has a mental issue related to their food, when you watch the way that people respond below. When you have the people who are going to freak out below because you've in some way attacked the motives and the mindset behind their particular magical cult-like diet, that's when you realize what you're dealing with. And when you guys watch the comments below, I'm going to leave a lot of the crazy ones up just so that you guys can see them. So you can see how these people react, and then you'll understand which ones actually have mental issues. And it becomes very apparent when you watch what they write. Now, I'm not saying everyone who follows these sort of diets has an eating disorder. There are people who believe that that's the case, though. There are coaches out there. If you go listen to like Ripito, he'll tell you anyone who's on a vegan diet has an eating disorder. It's an eating disorder. It's not a diet, and he just doesn't work with those sort of people. He refuses to take them as clients because he says he's not a psychologist. And that's his professional opinion as a coach, that he refuses to work with those people. So people need to keep that in mind who follow these diets. A lot of people don't want to deal with your nonsense. So the thing that you need to remember is that when these diets start to cause distress, or people have delusional beliefs about them, that's when we're dealing with a real problem. In other words, it's fine for someone to say, hey, I choose not to eat whatever this food group, I guess, for moral reasons, or I think my health might improve from it. But when we start talking about you think your health might improve from it and you're just trying it out, that's one thing. It's another thing when you hold provably false, absurd ideas and you cling to them in spite of all of the evidence to whatever cult-like diet that you're following. That's when it becomes a problem, because in that case, once you've been educated on that, then now we're dealing with a delusion, essentially. And a perfect example, people who follow ketogenic diets who believe that excess carbs are stored as fat in humans, right? Oh, carbohydrates are the reason we gain body fat, blah, 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 all this nonsense, right? Humans don't, under normal conditions, store carbohydrates as fat. Well, we don't do that. That's actually complete nonsense. It's not true. And that's been looked at in studies. And in fact, for people who aren't suffering severe metabolic conditions like severe metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes combined, which can actually be removed with dieting, and no, it doesn't require a low-carb diet to get rid of them, we don't really store carbohydrates as fat. We burn carbohydrates as fuel, and then we store the excess fat that we eat. But if we eat an all-fat diet, it's been looked at. People who follow keto diets who overeat calories gain fat just as fast as anyone does on a Western diet, right? Same caloric intake, you will gain fat just as quickly. It's been shown, it's been looked at, it's been seen, but they want to ignore all that stuff. But the reality is humans don't store carbohydrates as fat. We store the surplus dietary fat that we eat. All right, that's what we do. That is proven, understood, known human biology and nutritional science. That's what we do. And the problem we have, though, people say, well, you could just eat an ultra low-fat diet. Well, no, because then if you're eating so many carbs that you have that to fuel 100% of your nutritional needs, like all of your energy needs are supplied by carbs, even that little amount of fat you eat can still get stored. It's just you're not going to gain as much fat. So people tend to gain less fat on really, really low-fat diets when they overeat. But they still gain fat. You can still get fat doing that. And conversely, same thing happens. People on really low carbohydrate diets, unless it's an ultra high protein diet. But if it's a ketogenic diet, it's a totally different ballgame. Yeah, you'll gain fat. But they have these ideas that this is totally healthy and that all the health problems are caused by carbohydrates, and that's a delusional mindset. And when they legitimately believe that, once they go look at all the evidence and the scientific data, if they still believe that, we're dealing with someone who has an eating disorder. And what's interesting, you don't always see that. Like the people who follow like cycling ketogenic diets as athletes, that's a little bit different of a mentality, isn't it? Because they know that they need carbohydrates to function. They just realize that the keto diet suppresses their appetite. They eat less, they lose body fat through the week, and then when they carb load, that helps regain their performance, maintain muscle mass, all that stuff. So a lot of those people have multiple days a week to where they carb load, and because they know that they have to be an athlete and to gain muscle and to gain strength or to even preserve those things, that they have to carb load. They're not really doing a ketogenic diet, though, are they? Because they rotate through their stuff through the week. It's not the same thing. They call it that. They'll call it like a cycling ketogenic diet, but it's really not the same thing because they don't have the real carb phobia that people who talk about this keto lifestyle have. And I would say once you go over to a keto lifestyle and you start buying into all that nonsense, it's not based on reality. It's not based on science. At that point, you have an eating disorder, right? That's an eating disorder. You have an unhealthy relationship with your food and a phobia not based upon fact or reality of certain food types, right? And, they can't even distinguish between complex carb and table sugar. Those people that all they'll talk about, they equate everything related to table sugar as all carbohydrates. Like they can't even differentiate the fact that a potato or oats is not high fructose corn syrup. And it's this really interesting disconnect. They just throw all carbs together, and it's always refined carbohydrates. Well, when they mean refined sugars. But they don't seem to grasp that you can totally eat a high-carb diet without eating table sugar. Like they don't even understand that it's even possible because, again, you're dealing with disordered eating and delusional people. So you've got that, and then we talk about the vegans, the same thing. Veganism turns into an eating disorder. Now, granted, it's based on a certain worldview that we could argue isn't necessarily realistic, but it's an eating disorder when people start to literally believe that all animal products are the cause of all disease, right? As if vegans have lower cancer rates and everything else than the general population. They don't, by the way. But when they start to say that it's all meat, all dairy is the cause of all of these problems, and they can't differentiate in their mind. When you're dealing with someone who cannot differentiate that the fact that a pile of bacon or sausage that's 60 or 70% fat by calorie, that they can't tell that apart from chicken breast in their mind, that it's just all animal products. That they can't distinguish between the two, you're now dealing with a delusional person. And when that person legitimately believes that it's not the ultra high fat intake that a lot of people have, or people consuming excessive amounts of saturated fat, that's causing a lot of the diseases that we're worried about, such as potentially contributing to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and that they can't differentiate that quantity matters. Because of them, it's just all poison. When that's not what the science shows, that's not what epidemiology shows, that's not what the research in cardiology shows. It's that you can't consume excess or you suffer problems. When they can't differentiate between these things, and then all of a sudden in their mind they can't differentiate that someone who eats 3 pounds of bacon a day might have a different health profile from someone who eats a chicken breast every day at lunch, you're now dealing with someone with an eating disorder. And that's when these sort of things turn into that, when they cannot differentiate between the two, and in their mind it's just all poison, it's all bad, and they're scared of it, and it's the cause of all the world's problems. When the reality is all of the health problems that people are concerned about with really high fat animal food based diets, you see the exact same thing in high-fat plant-based diets. In other words, people who consume a lot of fried foods, like a lot of potatoes fried in oil, they suffer the exact same health concerns as the person eating the bacon does, right? They see the exact same problems. The problem is that, you're eating very, very excessive amounts of dietary fat. When you're in a large caloric surplus and you're eating a lot of fat, particularly in this case, these really refined and damaged fats like in the fried foods, which would be vegan technically. French fries are vegan. You consume that stuff in excess, you're going to see the exact same health problems and blood markers and everything else that the person eating piles of bacon does every day, right? But they can't differentiate that, and they can't seem to understand that that's the case. No, it's the animal product. So again, you're dealing with a delusion related to food that's not based on reality, it's not based on science, it's not based on evidence, it's just based on a belief that takes things to an extreme stance. And when you reach that threshold, that person has an eating disorder. It's no longer about logic, reason, health, anything else. It is purely about having a delusional mindset regarding what certain foods do, in spite of the evidence and data to the contrary. And the thing is that when you get either one of these groups, what's interesting is that they have their own circular logic. Since they only talk to other people who believe what they believe, they reinforce each other instead of looking at all the data objectively, and they'll cherry pick little tiny amounts of data and they'll feed into each other's delusions. Thus, basically, we create essentially diet cults. That's what happens. We create diet cults when this happens because they all feed into each other's same kooky delusions, and they don't look at anything outside of their small little circle, and they can't seem to handle it. So again, it then becomes a groupthink eating disorder. And you see the same things in the anorexic communities. They have their own forums and groups and everything online that are pro-anorexia, and they create all their own logic as to why it's healthy, and they reinforce each other. And you see the exact same behavior with things that are normally categorized as normal eating disorders. And it's really interesting to observe. But that's the difference. I'm not saying everyone who follows these diets has an eating disorder, but you can look at them and see the mentality and see at what point you cross that threshold to where it clearly becomes actually a delusional mindset regarding their food. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.